So you are a software engineer at PayPal.
Correct.
First, I want to start with like how confidential is working at PayPal?
So it's not talked about much, like what I can and can't talk about. Like my rule of thumb, I guess, is like if it's public knowledge, I could talk about it. Like for what I'm working on specifically now, it's not like it's never going to be a product that gets it has like a PR. I don't know.
Press release.
Like a press release. It's not gonna be that. I'm working on something much more fundamental to how the system works in the back end.
Okay.
So it's a little more gray area than what I've worked on in the past, which is like when I joined PayPal, I was working on the acquisition. So I worked for PayPal Credit. So like the credit products that PayPal has, like I've influenced a lot of the consumer facing ones. I've had a lot of influence on those the last 4 years. So when I started, I was like working on the acquisition team. So that was the team that was responsible for like when you apply for credit, when you hit the apply button, like how does that application turn into an actual credit account at PayPal? So like something like that, like I could talk about how that works because like it's kind of obvious that that's going to be an element of a credit product.
Right.
But then it gets into like what I'm working on now gets more into how PayPal works. And I don't know, I can give like vague details about it, I guess, but right. I don't know what I can and can't talk about.
Tonight's episode of High and Caffeinated is sponsored by Manscaped. Listen, I was never taught how to shave the nether region, okay? I can't tell you how many mishaps occurred because of the lack of know-how. Manscaped is trying to end that kind of suffering for men everywhere. What I love about them is their attention to detail. They have their new Lawnmower 4.0, which is a perfect trimmer. They have their Weed Whacker for ear and nose hair. They got ball deodorant, toner, basically everything you need for manscaping. And listen, you might not even have a Manscaped ritual and you're shaving with the equivalent of a paring knife. But Manscaped has just introduced the Performance Package 4.0. And in that package, you'll find everything I just mentioned, a travel bag, and even performance boxer briefs. Do yourself a favor, have less razor burn, reduce ingrown hairs, and have just a cleaner grooming experience overall with Manscaped. Get 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com with the code YAMI, Y-A-M-I-I. Yes, that is 20% off with the code YAMI, Y-A-M-I-I. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped. Now let's get to the show. Yeah, but I more mean like, have you ever been like, I don't know, denied access to something? Is there stuff that like only a specific team can work on and no one's allowed to see it? Like, is it that kind of confidential or not so much?
If it is, if there is something like that, I haven't encountered it. Like everything that I've worked on, I've been able to discuss with any coworker that I've had. I've never been working on like a top secret project or something. I've definitely worked on it's like the Venmo credit card was an example. So that's out there. It's been a product I think it's been released for a year and some change now. So I was there, like I was on that project like since the inception of it. Oh shoot, what was it? Like that was something I obviously wasn't going to talk about with like anyone outside of PayPal.
Right.
But anyone at PayPal, I was able to just have a free conversation about it.
Okay, gotcha. Do they keep it secret on like what teams are working on? Like, could you by chance see what a different team in PayPal is working on? No problem. Is that even public? Do they care who knows and who doesn't know? I'm just thinking from like a financial institution, right? There's probably some kind of red tape around, right?
Yeah.
A little bit, I can imagine.
I don't know if there is much of that on like in the developer side of things. I'm sure there is like in the law space and like the product design. I'm sure there's like a lot of meetings that don't go out to the wider audience until it's something that's like actually like planned and we're like ready to, I don't know, start implementing. Yeah. Then I think the communication actually like helps like teams talking with each other. Cause like when a product manager introduces an idea for a new product, like they don't necessarily, like they have an idea of what it is at a product level. They don't know what it takes to implement it technologically, right? That's a developer's job. So to like put barriers in place for teams to, like you can't communicate with each other, you're probably slowing down the development of that product pretty dramatically. And then at the end of the day, like we're all PayPal employees, like we're all on the same team. So
yeah.
I don't really come across like situations where I'm like, oh, what is that team working on? Like, it seems really like,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't even know if there's really a place that I can go to see like what all the teams at PayPal and what everyone is working on. But yeah, I basically just communicate with teams that have like a direct impact onto what I'm working on in the moment.
Did you guys have like, I remember when I was working for, big tech companies and so forth, they had like a newsletter come out with all the specific teams and what they're working on, the new stuff coming out. Do you guys have that as well?
Not like at a team level. There's just way too many teams at PayPal for it to be relevant like that. But they do have like a Friday newsletter that goes out that talks about like all the developments of the week in tech at PayPal specifically.
I mean, that must be pretty exciting to see. I don't know how technologically advanced is PayPal? It is a financial institution at the end of the day. Because I would imagine, Bank of America, not super technologically advanced, but something like PayPal, where the internet is like fundamental to its being. I can imagine you guys are working on something innovative all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I think PayPal's biggest advantage is their ability to roll things out quickly. Obviously it's a massive company. The competitors for PayPal are like, like Afterpay. I'm drawing a blank on.
Those kind of things though, where it's like interest-free installment payments of something.
Yeah,
I see.
I'm drawing a blank on like one of our bigger competitors. But anyways, they're like most of them are startups or like smaller companies. PayPal's advantage is that they've been around for decades now, and so they have a lot of infrastructure in place to be able to roll out things quickly. It's like particularly to like new countries, because every country has different regulations and different laws, and so it takes like startups a long time to be able to like be in compliance with whatever nation's laws that they're trying to roll out a product to. PayPal's legal team is massive, and so they're able to like figure that out and navigate that landscape much quicker. But yeah, technological advancement. I mean, we own Venmo, and so they're like Venmo's pretty relevant there, and like Venmo introduced crypto integrations, and so I don't know. Obviously, PayPal is a tech company, but they're not like I don't know if their competitive edge is like introducing new technology. It's more like integrations, like new integrations.
I see. Yeah, and you're talking about startups too. Because it seems like PayPal does seem to have some still of a startup feel, right? It's a massive company, worth just an ungodly amount of money. However, it does seem to maintain this culture of startup feel. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, like, how do you feel about that? Because I don't know. I've a weirdly specific opinion about that kind of stuff, but I've worked for two young companies that. I don't know. I guess they were technically startups, but newer companies that were still massive. And it was the very, stigmatized startup where it was like beanbag chairs and, full kitchens and like all of this very young company kind of stuff. I wanted your opinion on that. Like, what do you think of that kind of startup feel when it comes to these massive companies? I know we've been working from home, but when you're in the office, which I think is where you feel it most, or maybe you do feel it when you're at home, but like, what is your thoughts on that of having a startup feel, even if it is a massive company? Yeah.
So that startup feel, I think, is kind of, it kind of feels more like it's becoming like a tech feel too. I don't know. I have this idea of like a very corporate company having like, you're all working in like cubicles and you're isolated and there's a lot of red tape everywhere and like this very top down way of managing you. Like you're given this assignment and you work on it. And then the tech feel is more like open floor plan and people communicating with each other, like sitting next to people and a more collaborative environment and hitting all the buzzwords and everything. And having like stocked break rooms and PayPal doesn't have this, but like free lunches and that kind of thing. I think there's definitely pros and cons to it. Like that startup feel. I think the pros are it is more collaborative, and it's just easier to communicate. Like when I was in the office, it was easier to just like we'd all be sitting in the same vicinity, and like we are facing this problem, and it'd be way easier to just like we'd end up just talking to each other in the aisle, and then we would just grab a whiteboard and like kind of solve it right there. I think in a more corporate environment that wasn't the case necessarily. You were a little more siloed in your thinking and the problems that you were working on, or like you'd actually have like an official meeting for like everything, and then you'd just be in meetings all day, which I mean like can be a problem at times working at PayPal. Like a lot, like sometimes you go through seasons where someone like me in a software engineer 2 position is in meetings all day. Like some of my coworkers and the tech leads and the managers, like their job is
Meetings. That's their
basically
job.
meetings. Yeah. Which we can get into that, like my thoughts on that. But I don't know. I think, but the cons to it are, it's sometimes harder to get in the zone when you're working in the office in that kind of environment because there's so many distractions around you, and like maybe there's even a stigma around like popping headphones in because like you're not as available to like hop into a conversation like trying to address a specific problem, or you're seen as like, oh, maybe he doesn't want to be as social or whatever. So there's just a lot more distractions flowing, and they have a higher influence on you. So that's a complaint. It's a tricky balance, I think, between the two.
Yeah, and I pretty much agree completely with what you're saying there. I like the less siloed workplace, as in like open floor plan. I think that's awesome. If you need help from any team or anyone, they're pretty much available. I love that as a workplace. That's great. Where it kind of drops me off is when workplaces kind of, they want everyone to be a family, is what it seems like. They want your workplace to, you know what I'm saying? Is like they got like icebreakers, and that's not, bad inherently, but it's like they want to make sure that you feel at home at work. I get it. Like I understand where they're coming from, but it's strange to me when they are like almost forcing the issue versus just letting us socialize with each other naturally. And I think that might even be a better bond because we're doing it organically. Yeah. So that's kind of where I get a little like, all right, here we go. We got another meeting. It's not going to be an actual meeting. It's going to be one of these things where it's like forced socialization for 30 minutes. And so that's kind of where it loses me. And I agree that like that floor plan thing is good inherently, but I don't get in the zone at all. Yeah. There's so many things. There's hundreds of people all around you that you can just look up from your screen and they're everywhere and something's always happening. Like it's a lot. I almost like if it was like half and half. Like I could have almost like solitary work in a sense, or something that's a little bit more confined, and then something that is a little bit more open depending on the kind of work it is. Yeah,
I think there are companies out there that do that. I mean, I've obviously never worked at Google, but I think like from what I've heard, Google has something like that where you can just like go and like it's a much more open environment all around where I don't even know if you even have like a specific desk at Google, which PayPal is kind of moving to that model too, but for different reasons.
So you just have like a bunch of tables out or desks out, and then anyone can use anything. It's just workstations.
Yeah, and then I think Google, like, you can just like go work at a beanbag, which I mean you can't if people had a beanbag too, but like I think it's like more like the culture, and then you can go to like an individual office or just like some kind of quiet space to get in the zone. So you have that freedom too, but the con with that is if there's no assigned seating, then you're kind of like you don't have that advantage of like the advantage of having that open floor plan is like the fact that you're sitting around your team is kind of the advantage of that, because you can just like talk about the problems that you're facing. Whereas like you just go to the office for the sake of going to the office, I don't know, like maybe you're like it's more creative because you're like bumping into people that you wouldn't normally bump into and like exchanging ideas. But as far as like progress on the specific problem that you're working on as a team, I don't know if that really encourages that.
Yeah, that's helped that issue or not. I agree. Yeah. And we were talking about meetings before, and I do want to talk about that. So we were talking about software engineering 1, I'm guessing is just like pretty much strict coding, right? And, maybe some meetings, but I'm sure when you go to software engineer 2, a lot more meetings.
It kind of worked out that way at first because I got promoted to software engineer 2 right at the brink of the Venmo credit card project, which was just, there's so much planning around that. So there were a lot of meetings. So it worked out that way in the beginning, but didn't end up being true. Like,
how about
overall?
Not more meetings, less coding. Is that fair?
Between 1 and 2, there's not a whole lot of a difference, I think. Okay. I think the difference is more like influence and like what kind of responsibility you're given when it comes to like design of the system.
I see. And then so like what is the difference, I guess, infrastructurally from like 1 to 2? Like, do you take on more responsibility? Is it more teamwork oriented versus like 1 maybe more autonomous?
Yeah. So I think it's just more like the responsibility that's expected. I don't think there's a clear definition between the two. I think it's just like, oh, you've been doing enough that you kind of warrant like a promotion and like put you on that track to get from 2 to 3, and then there's like technical managers, and then you go up from there. which you might not even want. But again, we can get into that later.
Yeah. Well, no, that's what I'm curious about is that I find it strange that the career path of someone in software engineering is doing, coding. I'm sure what they got into software engineering in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Something they love, hopefully. And then they move up, and then over time, you're doing less and less coding.
Yes.
And then none eventually, right?
Eventually, almost none, yeah.
And it's just so interesting to me because it's like, hey, you become better and better at this one thing, and then you just like stop doing it over time equally. Like it just is a bit strange of a path.
It's a problem because like the best engineers are given more responsibility, but eventually you're given enough the responsibility of like enough. You need a lot of oversight on a lot of different things, and so it's not practical for you to be in the code. We need you for your mind, and so you're in all these meetings and you're thinking about all these like complexities and how to address them, and that becomes more your job is just like planning with other teams or planning with people from the same team, and then like communicating the work that's resulted from those meetings to the people who are actually coding.
Yeah.
And it's a great path for people who enjoy that. I mean, there are engineers who are great at communication and kind of enjoy being in that headspace all the time more than they like being in the code. I think all engineers like being in code, but I think there are just personalities that are more geared to being in that environment.
Yeah, more orchestrating than kind of being a function of the equation and kind of orchestrating the equation itself.
Yeah, there's people whose minds just kind of work that way, and so that's just like a natural fit for them. But then there's others who like are in tech because they love coding and like being close to the problem. And if you're great at that, then yeah, you'll go on to this path. You'll be given like promotions that'll eventually just make you take away you just have all your time in meetings.
Exactly. Yeah. I worked a one sales job at one of these young companies, and we had a person there that did sales for like 5 years. Now that's unheard of. If you do it for like a year and a half to 2 years, like you're a manager, like you're not even doing sales at that point. You're not talking to customers anymore. You're like orchestrating. But he said he loved it. He was like, I don't want to be a manager. Like, what's the point in that?
Yeah.
Like, I'm good at this. You know what I mean? He would have been a great manager anyway. Like, he would have been fantastic, I'm sure. But he's like, I'm making more money off this than I am doing. And so why would I give up something that I'm good at and I enjoy doing to doing something that has nothing to do with that in a sense? Like, I'm not talking to customers anymore. I'm just orchestrating people within the company, and that's it, not outward facing at all. And potentially getting less money because it's more static versus compensation, like, you know what I mean, for that. And so that was his thing. I was like, I agree with that completely. I'm like, if I had a thing that I am good at and I make the most money doing, I don't want to leave that unless I, eventually did, and then I have that opportunity. But yeah, I'd probably be that one person that's just like a strict coder. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like, I don't want to be a manager or anything. Like, I'm good here.
Yeah. I mean, for me, my favorite days at work are the days where I like don't have any meetings scheduled and I can just get in the zone and code the whole day. I like design work a lot, but I like designing like what I'm working on. I'm not the biggest fan of designing like how the services that my team is working on interact with all these other teams. Like, I like dabbling in that, and being in a meeting like here and there and discussing that because I like figuring. I just like addressing problems, but then yeah. I don't know. I'm not geared toward like having more oversight over the problem than just being in meetings all day, I think
it's fine. Even if you're good at it, I think if you enjoy it less, I think that's perfectly fine as well. You know what I mean? I think it's something that's just pure preference. I don't think it's something that's like, again, like maybe
and
even
you need those people.
Exactly. I didn't think the best managers are even like reluctant leaders. You know what I mean? Those are the best people you want. And it's like, even if they don't want the job, but they are the best for it, I think that's perfectly fine because again, it's like they just like what they like, and that's okay. You know what I mean? But I can imagine that is hard because it's like if you're there for a while and you've obviously like, proven your chops, like, hey, it's time, and you're like, I'm good. That might come off as a little strange. You're like, well, what's the point? Like, why are you trying to leave? Like, what's going on?
I don't know what the culture is for tech at large, but for PayPal, at least with like the experience that I've had with management, like they take your preferences into account. Like I think the management has done a really good job, at least in my experience, in like identifying like strengths and kind of giving you opportunities that are geared toward what they see your strengths being. And then I've switched teams a lot, like in the 4 years that I've been there. And with each team switch or project switch, like my manager has kind of asked me if like I was interested in it. Like I could have declined and it would have been okay. I think.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that would influence future decisions potentially, but I think that's still like a needed thing. It's like, hey, we're going to have that preference at heart. Obviously, they don't want you to do something that you don't want to do. Simple enough.
Right. Well, you're not going to be as productive if you're doing something you don't want to do.
Yeah.
Like if you don't like coming into work, then you're not going to. You're just not going to do as good of a job.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking of like going into work, what are things that I also wanted to talk about, because I feel like you would know this better than anyone I know, is that like workaholism is like rampant in the tech industry. I feel like more than any other industry, like by a long shot. Like people are working 80-hour, 120-hour work weeks, like as if it's fine, as if it's like that's just normal. And I wanted to hear from someone that maybe on the inside, maybe you know some people that you work with, or people worked with in the past, or just people you've seen. Why is that so rampant within the tech industry specifically? Is there a specific reason why it's something like that it's within tech, or just in general? Because I truly don't understand it. I can't imagine pouring myself into my corporate job at the end of the day, 80 hours a week, and still feeling like good about it. Something about that doesn't strike me as normal, but maybe you can give me some insight on why that would be at least reasonable.
Yeah. So for PayPal, the work-life balance of PayPal is pretty solid. Like they don't expect you to work 80-hour weeks or like nothing close. Like they expect you to have like, you know, the time that you're in work, and then time that you log off, and then time that you like your personal life. There is a workaholic culture in tech. I think specifically in the Bay Area, but I don't know because I lived in the Bay Area. I grew up there since like basically high school onward or junior high onward, and then came to Arizona for college. So I spent like a good amount of time in the Bay Area, and like the culture is like it's just a rat race. Like I mean, it's some of it's probably influenced that like by the fact that it's so expensive to live there, right? And so you have to like make a decent amount of money. I don't know. People just seem like more materialistic and more like their life just seems more oriented toward like achievement. Okay. So maybe that's what the motivation is at the end of the day, is prestige and achievement. There are people who just love working, like they just that's what they want to do all the time. But I don't think that's everyone.
Yeah,
there.
I mean, I hope it isn't, to be honest. I mean, that it's scary to see, because I agree. It's like that is something you see in Silicon Valley specifically, is everyone just working. 40 hours seems like it's nothing to them.
No,
you know what I mean?
No.
It's like they just keep going. But yeah, I agree. Maybe haven't even really thought about that, but maybe you're right. Maybe it is something a little bit more, maybe not materialistic specifically. Like I'm sure they're not like, oh, I need to work 100 hours this week so I can get that Ferrari next year. Like I doubt they're thinking like that, but much more goal oriented. We have to hit this number by, as quick as possible. The only way to do that, work as many hours as possible. And they just don't see that personal life as a thing. Yeah.
I mean, there's this like underlying motive in Silicon Valley of like trying to change the world. Like everything you're doing is like, it's going to change the world. Yeah. And so like, I don't know, when that's your goal, like it kind of makes sense that it would manifest as you putting in like 80-hour work weeks. And
I guess that's true. Down. Yeah. I mean, I guess also now that I'm thinking about it, is that like, I guess with Silicon Valley and like all these, again, startups, sometimes it is like, Google, Apple, all these, massive companies as well, but it is a huge amount of startups too. It's like, it's the only way it's going to get off the ground to get these projects going is to work that many hours. Like you're not going to do it just a 40-hour work week if you're trying to build something from the ground up.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're trying to build something from the ground up, like that's pretty much the only way you're going to get off the ground is to have like a core group of dedicated people that are all like working really hard.
Yeah.
I mean, I've struggled with that idea. Like because I do have this desire to build something. I just don't know if I'm willing to do what it takes. Like I enjoy having a balance in my life, and like I'm getting married soon, and I'm looking forward to like starting a family and like really investing time into that and like in my friends, and so I don't know how much of like I just don't know how much of that I can do, and how like try and build something from the ground up.
Yeah. I think you hit it perfectly too. I think that's where my kind of inclination of disdain for this kind of like almost family culture for startups, that I'm like, we probably shouldn't do that, is because I feel like work should just be work. Like if it is just a corporate job or something that you're just doing for money specifically, and that's definitely the main goal, I think that's fine. Like that's perfectly fine. You don't need to like make it as if it's not that. Like we're all on the same page here, right? We're all getting paychecks. Like everyone's working here. Like we're all in salary, right? Cool. Let's just leave it at that. And like we don't even have to love each other. We just have to be workable. And that should just be that. I don't think we need to be a family. That's not like a necessary function of this company to keep going.
Yeah. Well, it's also executed poorly, I think, in a lot of the time. Like it feels artificial. Like,
very cheesy. Yeah. Very
a little
corny.
cheesy.
It's
I'm like, dude, like, I know how to make friends.
Yeah.
And like, and you're just working on something, like camaraderie will just naturally happen. And the people around you, like you'll just start to, and hopefully you'll just start to enjoy the people around you, and then you'll become friends kind of naturally. It kind of feels like when a company's trying to do that to their employees, it's like, hey, I don't know you. And like, we're not going to get to know each other, odds are. Like someone super high up in management who's visiting, or like pushing out this program, and it's like, hey, let's start like creating this family-oriented culture or whatever. Right. It's like, so that already feels like kind of fake and disingenuous in a way. But also it just kind of feels like when you're a kid and it's like your parents and like they're just trying to orchestrate friendships, and it's like
doesn't work well.
It doesn't work well when you're an adult. And it's giving me flashbacks of when I was a kid, and here I am in like this corporate environment, and it's like, dude, like I know how to make friends.
Yeah,
and
like we're good. We're good on this. Yeah,
I just want to come to work and
it's like, if you want to fund like a happy hour, that's perfect. Like that's all we need. Like you don't have to like execute this conversation. Like we'll do it naturally. That's fine.
Yeah, like hosting events.
That's perfect.
Yeah, that's great. Like I love going out with my coworkers and making friends with them.
Yeah. Forcing conversation, that is not the way to do it. I promise. Like it's just not it. Like it will be a bond. It just won't be as strong as if it was done naturally or organically. Just simply enough.
Yeah.
Like it just probably won't be.
Yeah, it has to be organic.
Yeah. At the very basic, I agree. And so with that as well, so yeah, because what they want to do, right, is get, if they have thousands of employees, they obviously want a lot of, cross-pollination with all of the ideas and so forth, and getting everyone talking and, that kind of thing. I do wonder in a big company like PayPal, do you have any idea how many employees you guys have, by the way? Thousands?
Tens of thousands? Yeah.
Okay. So you have tens of thousands of people within the same company all working on different stuff. Do you feel your impact when you're working on stuff, or is it kind of diluted with everyone working on it? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I feel the impact of what I work on. Like the Venmo credit card, right? Like like the stuff I worked on. So like one of the APIs that I built was for the terms of service. So like right off the
massive.
You just like you're presented with the terms of service before you can even apply, and so like that was presented by an API that I implemented. But I mean, more than that, like the repayment system. So if you like create a repayment on the Venmo credit card, like that hits the service that I worked on. And the account servicing. So any changes to the account or any other servicing, or like you're trying to message if you're having an issue and you have like want to message a customer service agent, like I built that API, I led the charge on that, on the design of it, and then like orchestrating that with Synchrony, the backing bank. So I definitely feel the impact of that. And I feel like I've felt the impact on a lot of the projects. I mean, PayPal is just working on so much that like I really don't know what I don't know. I would say like 95% of the teams at PayPal are working on. Like there's this whole, like the company has a life of its own, obviously. Like there's no way I can keep up with all the changes that are going out. I basically just get the highlights. And then like a lot of the times, like, I mean, 95% of the company is not going to hear about what I do.
Right.
But I know what I worked on. And I know that like someone's hitting my code every day. Like even just you and I talking here, like my code's been executed probably like a million times.
Yeah.
So like, it's just a massive company. So if you know what to look for, which I mean, your eyes are pretty close to what, like what's going on in production surrounding the stuff that you've worked on. So I don't know. I feel like it's easy to feel the impact.
That is nice.
At least for the stuff I work on. I don't know that that's a case for like across the board.
Right. I think that is one of the biggest things when it comes to not even the tech sector, just big companies in general. I think it's very easy to be kind of, washed away in the like dilution of responsibility that it's like, am I making a difference here? Like they can replace me tomorrow, and like what would change? You know what I mean? I think that is a huge deal with people, and maybe that's why they're not feeling super fulfilled in their jobs, that kind of thing. But if you can feel that impact on some kind of daily basis or something, and knowing just the pure fact of knowing that your code is being executed millions upon millions of times over the year, like that alone is like a lot of inspiration and motivation to like derive from.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, so with the tech sector in general, I kind of wanted to dive into this of it, because you can't even talk about the tech sector in totality without talking about like the evilness of it. And I kind of wanted to talk about that, of just tech in general, and like, it seems like any company, as soon as they hit a threshold, is labeled as evil. It just seems like that's the label for big companies, just in general. And I want to know, like, maybe you have some insight that I can't think of just like, why is that? I can't truly believe that every single company is just it just gets evil, and like that's just the way they do things and how they like interact and make decisions. I can't really fully believe that. That doesn't seem right. It just seems like they hit a threshold of like whatever. Oh, they hit a $500 or $500 billion market cap. They're bad. Look at all these terrible decisions we just uncovered, right?
Yeah.
And so like, why is that? Do you think that people label tech companies as evil as soon as they hit like, let's say, the Fortune 500? Like, why is that?
Well, I think there's a general like hatred for billionaires out there, like in the culture right now. Like people who just make a lot of money. Like I don't know why there's the association of like money equals evil. I think it's just this idea that like, oh, if you have $1 billion, like, I don't know, maybe people assume that you have to make certain shady decisions in order to get there. I think maybe it's an underlying disbelief or belief that like meritocracy is not a thing in America. That the only way to get up there is power.
Be corrupted somehow, one way or another.
So maybe that's one reason affecting it. But I think so evil tech companies or companies that are looked at as evil. I think the go-tos are usually like Facebook, like Instagram, which is also Facebook, Amazon, Twitter. I mean, those are the kinds of.
I mean, again, you can list literally top 20, top 50 companies. Like you could find very evil things for about all of them. I guarantee it.
Yeah,
like, it's just how
Google
it is.
for sure. Yeah, Apple.
Yeah.
So
it's every one of them. Really.
Yeah.
Like you could even get Samsung, Canon, Sony. Like it doesn't matter. Like any company, there's like, oh yeah, evil. Look at all these decisions.
I think some are looked at more poorly than others. I think Facebook probably has a really like one of the worst reputations between all those, and then I think Google is probably up there too, and like mostly due to like privacy concerns and feeling like they're spying on you. But I think I don't know, people probably put this evil connotation with their decisions just because maybe their decisions just have had poor consequences. I mean, people are much more likely to like criticize. It's so easy to criticize someone who's like actually trying to do something, or like change the world. Like, I mean, at the level of like those big companies, like I mean, they do have the influence to change the world. And I would say like the introduction of those companies are like net positive, almost across the board.
Of course.
Like Google, like I can't imagine now living life pre-Google. Like I would say that they've had a major positive influence on humanity.
Yeah, definitely net positive.
Net positive.
Anyone can agree with that.
But there's been some shady decisions, and I think a lot of it just has to do with like they're building something it's completely unprecedented. Like all these companies are working on things that have never been done before. And naturally, you're just navigating a new landscape. Like naturally, you're just going to uncover mistakes, or like you're going to throw something out there in the world and like release it, and you think it's going to have this like all these positive effects. Like, but at the end of the day, you just don't know how these things are going to turn out or pan out.
Yeah, not fully. I mean, definitely not to the degree where you're like, oh yeah, this decision is perfectly angelic in its entire fundamental infrastructure, and it's going to just turn out fine.
Yeah,
it's like when you're talking about
releasing a product to hundreds of millions of people. In the case of like Google and Facebook, like billions of people. Like, in order for you to claim that you have a complete idea of what of all the effects that this product is going to have, you'd have to claim that you understand humanity so profoundly that you know how billions of people are going to interact with this. Like they're going to interact with it exactly the way that you intended, and it's going to have exactly the effect on society that you expect it to have. Like,
true, and you just can't. You really just can't do that. I remember I saw an interview with the CEO of YouTube. You know, something that I'm very like passionate about, and I just wondered. I was like, okay, let's see like what this executive of YouTube has to say, and I was actually dumbfounded on how like almost simplistic the decisions were. They're like, because they got rid of this dislike button. That's probably the last huge deal of YouTube, right? And she was just like, yeah, we had a lot of people, going like hate raids and so forth. And we just thought that, that would be the way to go. And of course, not everyone's going to like it, but that's just the way it is. And we just deemed that was for the best. And they're like, and she was like, yeah, but you can just like download an extension that shows you the dislike buttons. That's still public knowledge. Like that's still within like the code. So like you can do that. And I was like, wow, like that's a really good point. I was like, you know what? Like I didn't like it at first, but the way she explained it was just so like, yeah, like we just wanted to go this way. Maybe it works out. Maybe it doesn't. She also said that. Maybe it's fine. Maybe we change it next year. I was like, that's kind of what you want. Like kind of this,
humility.
They're thinking about it, obviously, but it's like, yeah, we've done mistakes and we're going to learn from it and keep pivoting. And I kind of like that even from something as massive as YouTube. And And I think that's kind of the humility that big companies need at large, because I feel like that is probably also part of the evil label, is that they seem like they're always in the right, right? Because it's very rare that you see like apologies. You know what I mean? Like that's very rare, even if they are completely in the wrong, which does happen because we're all human and all humans make up companies. But it does seem like they have to seem like they're this superior giant within whatever sector they're in, and whatever they say is just, gospel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe they don't do the best job a lot of the times communicating why they make certain decisions. Well, first of all, like sometimes you find out a decision that a company made based on the effects.
Yeah.
So like, for example, like there's been a couple algorithmic concerns with Facebook, right? Like, or like Instagram.
Yeah.
You don't know the Instagram algorithm. You don't know the Facebook algorithm. All you know is that like it's had this like during election cycles, or like you see like that we're like more politically divided, and you're like, oh, you're blaming them for the algorithm, right? But they're not communicating what's going on behind the scenes. Twitter too, like they're not communicating with us like what's going on. So it's easy to read like malintent into it, because like there's no other alternative explanation when all you see is the negative side effects of it. Like how do you, I don't know, propose that it was actually made with like good intent?
Right.
You just have to have faith. You just have to have faith that like most people aren't corrupt.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I do want to say though, like I feel like I am, I do believe that there are some pretty poor decisions that maybe like people with a good conscience know should be poor decisions. But I also know that like if you hand an engineer a task, like someone who's super engineering minded, they're just going to do it. They're just going to get it done, like, and it's fun. Like working on problems is fun. Like working on like coding and like trying to build an algorithm solving a novel problem. Like it's fun. And so you don't necessarily like, as like an employee who's implementing it, don't really think about how it's going to
the long-term kind of morality of the company. I'm sure because if everyone thought that way, everyone should, just as an idealistic kind of scenario, like you should, but like think of how much like slower the process will be getting anything done. It's like, hey, should we do this? Let's talk about this. Like we should just keep talking about this on like why this might be bad, why this might be good. It's like, that sounds good just like on paper, but it's going to really slow down efficiency, and like we're not going to get these products out nearly in time. And I feel like that's a huge problem.
Yeah.
So I agree. And so speaking of morality, I do want to talk about that as well, because that is like the evilness of labels, right? For when it comes to these big companies, is that, look what they're doing, what an insane immoral decision that they're making about the algorithm or about whatever. With that, do you like let's say like, the world's under your control, these tech companies will do whatever you say. When it comes to morality and making those kind of moral decisions as tech companies, like what do you have a take on that by chance? Like, should they be so involved in these kind of moral decisions?
Oh, like societal moral decisions, you mean?
Yeah, exactly that. Like, cause I mean, we're seeing that so many times in the past, like, let's say like 3 to 5 years, like it's just massive now. On like, let's say like privacy concerns, or like banning specific people or specific groups, that kind of thing. Should there be kind of an end all be all, like this is the rule for morality when it comes to tech companies, or should they keep going and kind of on this almost onslaught of just like, canceling people, banning people, that kind of thing?
I don't know. I think companies are more involved than they should be in the like morality of society, or like deeming what is good and what is bad. I was watching this interview with like Lex Fridman podcast with the CEO of Coinbase, and he was kind of like talked about the like employee activism kind of thing, and what he was saying was it's really difficult to solve a problem, to solve the problem like at a societal level. Like Coinbase, right, or literally any company is trying to do something new and really trying to like put out a product out there that doesn't exist, and trying to do something really hard to change the world. All these employees are getting involved in these political topics and having like coming out with opinions and this and that, as if they're trying to like as if they know the right answer, and it's not. It's doing a disservice to the gravity of the problem, because again, it's hard. It's really hard to solve an issue. And so if you're focused on building a company, there's no way you've put enough focus into whatever problem you're commenting on in order to feel like you have the solution. My issue with it too, though, is a lot of companies put out statements as if they know the right answer,
Yeah.
and no one knows the right answer. Like these moral landscapes are tricky to navigate, and I don't know, to have the arrogance to say that like like some people's answers kind of make it feel like the answer is so obvious. It's like, oh, like either my opinion is clearly right.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, it doesn't seem like you are really, I don't know, trying to think of the problem from the opposite perspective.
Yeah, just like grasping the nuance of it, that kind of thing. You're
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's not so black and white usually. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
Simply enough.
Right. So I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of making any problem seem super black and white. Everything is full of nuance and is a gray area, and I don't think you should make people feel stupid for thinking something different than you. Anyways, I just think these problems, like most of the societal problems today, are really difficult, and most companies don't have a right to say that they have the right answer, and they just haven't put in the time or the effort to solve these issues.
Yeah.
It's not their concern at the end of the day. Like I don't want the companies I'm interacting with to be involved in politics. Everything is so involved in politics and morality today. Like I just want you to give me the best product that you can. It feels like a distraction.
100%.
At every level of analysis. It's like, I don't need you to pick a side. I just want
Whatever product or service you're providing. You're a company, right? Like
I just want a good iPhone.
Yeah. You don't need these social complexities involved. Like it's fine. Like let's just get along with the products. Yeah, I agree. Like I think they simplify very complex, nuanced situations and decisions, and they again deem it as like law in there. Like this is the answer. You guys are crazy for saying otherwise. And I agree that I think companies and like especially tech companies should just like kind of just let things be and just let the world be as nuanced as it is and just kind of focus on whatever your specific sector is. My best example is like Adobe. Adobe makes fantastic products. They never get involved with anything, and they just keep making innovative strides on their software. And I'm like, that's genius. Let's just all be like Adobe and just don't even worry about this world. Like, just make the best thing you can. And they're even a perfect example too, because it's like, for creatives, right? For photography, for videographers, for whoever, like just artists in general. So it's perfect. It's like they don't have to dive into these social complexities of today's society. They just don't have to do that.
Yeah, it's weird how people feel obligated to do that. I think the CEO of Coinbase was saying that he kind of explained how it happened, and he was like, man, people would come to me and ask all these questions about like all these technological decisions and like the strategy of the company, and I was making decisions based on the company, and then it was like this weird turning point where people just started asking like, hey, what's your stance on this, or what's your take on this problem, or like all these political issues. And then all of a sudden he found himself like feeling obligated to respond and put out statements. And then it occurred to him that he was like, wait, like this isn't what I became why I became a CEO. This is, I'm no longer doing the work that I found enjoyable. And if this is my job, I don't want to be CEO anymore. And so he basically like told the employees that Coinbase is not going to be involved in politics. Like that's not the problem. That like you can do that on your own time. Like we're not going to say that you can and can't, or like we're not going to encourage or discourage like certain political opinions or certain activism, but that's going to be on your own time. Like when you're at the company and you're at work, we're working on a problem. Like he's like, I don't have the answers to these issues. Like I haven't put in the time to like really come up with like an articulate answer. I don't have the right to have this higher than average weight to my opinion on most issues.
And then to impose that on anyone, including their employees or customers, it's like, that's clearly, come on, like time and place, and that's clearly not it. Like again, when you're kind of talking about these nuanced perspectives, it's like, keep it like that. Just keep it nuanced perspective. Like that's perfectly fine. Maybe you do have a specific opinion, and that's okay to, even if the CEO of Coinbase wanted to, portray that to the world, just don't do it through Coinbase, simply enough, right? Just do it on like your own kind of platforms, whatever. Yeah. But making a Coinbase platform, being like Coinbase stands for this exactly. Yeah. It's like hold on, like just relax, like focus on your products, focus on your services, that kind of thing, and just do that and just be innovative in that way. You don't need to dive into that stuff. Right. You just don't need to.
Well, especially at most of these companies are operating at the international level too. Yeah. Like most of these like issues that they like, oh, we stand for this and this and this, and it's like a lot of that's not even relevant in other countries. Yeah. Like especially with like Coinbase, which is like getting into DeFi, like the countries where they have the biggest impact are like third world countries. Yeah. And like they're not concerned with like the politics of the US.
No.
And so it's just a distraction. You know, they're trying to change the world.
Yeah, exactly.
And so
where do you see this going? Like, where do you see this kind of growing social complexities, right? Obviously only going to get more difficult over time. When it comes to these tech companies, like, do you have any prediction on where this goes? Let's say like 10 or 20 years from now. Like, do you think they're going to cool off? Do you think they're going to like, pedal to the metal into whatever social issues that they're going to? Like, where do you think this goes? Like, my like thought is like, where do they think this ends? Like, let's say they get everything they want. Mm-hmm. Now what? Like, what does that world look like? Is everything just like perfect utopia for them? And then like, oh, they don't have to make these decisions and stances anymore? Like, where does this end? I don't see it.
I think a lot of companies put out statements to kind of appease the mob. I feel like if they don't, they may lose a huge customer base. That's another thing too. Like another reason why I don't like the companies having an opinion on these things is because it feels disingenuous to me, like the motivation behind it.
Yeah.
So it feels like they're just saying whatever is like correct. Like there's a correct opinion out there, and they're like, oh, we're on your like the side of whatever to kind of, I don't know, appease the mob.
Right.
I don't know, maybe I just haven't been paying attention enough, but it kind of feels that like we've calmed down a bit, maybe because we're not in like the middle of an election cycle and we're kind of like in the middle of an administration. Maybe that's the reason.
True.
It feels like people are more, I don't know, most people like don't care. I feel like most people don't care if a company puts out a statement or not.
Yeah.
And I think most people also feel sick of kind of feeling like everything is politicized. It feels like that group, that population is kind of having more influence now than they did in the past to me. So I don't know, maybe I feel like maybe it'll calm down. Again, I've kind of been like not on social media as much. So maybe it's just, I used to be super addicted to Twitter. And so I used to feel heated all the time. And I used to be like the division of the country was like just in my face all the time, right? And that affected how I perceived everything. Like it felt like everything was, I don't know, like everything stood for something and everyone had an opinion and there was like tensions were high.
Yeah.
Since removing myself from that, things have, I don't know, the world just feels much more calm. So I don't know, maybe that's influencing my opinion here, but I feel like it's going to calm down eventually.
Yeah, at least that's the hope. I would hope so too. Yeah, I agree. I think people that, start their day with 20 minutes browsing on Twitter, it's probably not a good idea.
Oh, no.
I mean, like you're probably going to be enraged immediately. And it's like, do you want to start your day like that? You're going to have a very skewed sense of the world after that 20 minutes of browsing. If that's the first thing you do, like it's going to be, might not be the best day for you.
You have your own problems in life, like, and to start your day, like scrolling Twitter. Like, I feel like I was good about that. I wouldn't usually, I usually don't and haven't really had a problem with waking up and like immediately going on my phone and like and scrolling social media. And I just feel like it's a bad strategy. Like you're immediately like bringing the problems of the world into your day, and you have your own issues that you need to face. Like you have your own stuff going on. Like you can't solve the problems of the world by reading Twitter tweets and comments and making posts and expressing your opinion on social media. Like it's not going to solve anything. And most of the time, it's just going to make you more upset and give you a very, like you said, like a very skewed idea of what's going on in the world. Yeah.
I also do think it's a tool for distraction as well. If you're enraged on the world's issues, it's way easier to look past your own, right? Like if you're enraged on like, can you believe this massive company's doing this, or this country's doing this, or this, politician's doing this, versus like, man, like I woke up at 11 p.m. today. That's late. That's late. You know what I mean? Where it's just like when you scale up other things so much, your problems are completely looked past. You might not even realize you have these kind of internal issues to work on if you're so enraged with, everything else in the world. It's like, maybe you should just look inward a little bit. And it's very small scale compared to, starving countries or something, but it's like, you still got to work on that. And that's better use of your time anyway.
For sure,
versus getting enraged and not doing anything for this issue.
Well, culturally, it feels like we've definitely just gone that direction. I don't know, since the introduction of social media. I mean, I don't know. We were pretty young at the introduction of social media, but especially in these last like 6-ish years, it feels like culturally we've just kind of gone away from self-awareness and really working on yourself and like looking at your looking in the mirror and working on your own issues, it feels like everyone has an opinion on everything, and everyone knows, like, everyone's enraged at something, at the world. Like, everyone, all the problems exist out there, and none of them are inside. And you're fine just the way you are. Like that mantra. It's like, you're not.
Yeah.
No one is fine.
No one
is fine.
Earth.
Like, you should be looking at yourself in the mirror every single day and figure out what you need to work on. Like, what are the most pressing issues? Like, what are you most inadequate in? And like, what are your biggest obstacles? Like, you should be really focused inward, and like, and if you're going to expand your focus outward, it should be on the people close to you. You're like your family and your close friends. Like, that's where you actually make an impact.
Yeah,
is the people you know and are interacting with on a daily basis and growing as a person. You're not going to solve any of the issues out there if you don't have that foundation set.
Yeah,
like, you're not going to have an impact. Like, you're I don't know. You're not going to solve climate change.
No, you're just not going to do it. Yeah,
it's a hard problem, and to say it's easy is, it's doing the problem a disservice.
I agree. I think if everyone woke up and just focused on being like a touch better, just a touch better than yesterday, just a little bit, like not even a lot, just like barely better. I mean, imagine where you could be in 5 years, right? Like, it'd just be so much simpler, right? And if you just stopped focusing on such mass scale, frustrations, and focus on just inward, maybe even small scale, like maybe they're not big problems that you deem, but you're just still working on it, you're going to be far, far, past where you were a year from now, right?
Yeah.
Just simply enough. But I don't think people do that. Yeah. It's not an inward looking society anymore. It's just not. Just isn't. It's just easier not to, weirdly. It's so much easier not to. We have so many distractions, so many things to look at.
Well, like I said earlier, like, it's easy to criticize. Like, it's very, and it's kind of convenient to think that all the problems are out there. Like, no one, like, looking at inward and addressing like problems that, addressing issues that you have, it's uncomfortable. It's not fun at first. I think it becomes more fun. It's always uncomfortable to like really face yourself in the mirror and really be like, man, I really need to get this under control, or gotta
start working out, whatever it is. Right. Yeah, that's a hard thing to do, right? Because now you got to get up and work out for an hour or whatever it is. That is difficult. Waking up and immediately clicking a single app on your phone and then scrolling with your thumb is super easy compared to that, right? Like, you don't even have to get up for that.
Yeah, well, and criticizing something, you can criticize something. Yeah, like in that same situation, you see something, you're like, oh, post a tweet, like, oh, I'm positive influence on the world,
and I'm still in bed. It's like, oh, great, like, it's so easy. Like, oh, who would have guessed? Yeah, it's just so much easier to distract yourself than it is to actually work on yourself, and that is something that is. It seems like it's almost gone. There's people obviously that still do it, and I'm glad there are, but it seems like the growing masses are not doing that, which is upsetting. It's like, you should challenge yourself a little bit. Like, focus on getting good at one thing. Just like, even if it's something so stupid, just try to get good at that thing and see what happens 3 months from now. You're going to see massive differences. Like, you know what I mean? Just like, carry a journal around, read. Right, go for a walk.
Expanding the window of time that you're operating in, I think, is really important too. Yeah, like the culture now is like, it's so what do you call it? Instant gratification. Yeah, like you're always looking for like the next dopamine hit. Essentially, I mean, even if you're doing it, you're probably doing it at a subconscious level. Yeah. Like, everything needs to be very now, and if it's like not in the next day or two, or like it doesn't feel like it's worth pursuing. Like working out, right? Like, oh, I want to be fit. It's easy to think that and then go to the gym for a week. And then even if you decide to pursue fitness and working out consistently, at least like something that I've faced is there's this implicit end to the goal. Like, oh, like the one day I'll be fit, and then I'm not done, but like I don't have to put in the work I'm putting in now. Like, fitness is like it's an ongoing thing. It's an ongoing thing, yeah. It's like the window of time that you're operating in for fitness is the rest of your life.
Infinite, yeah. Like, you continue to do it, yeah.
Yeah, there's no one day that you're going to be fit and then stay fit.
Yeah. Like, and stop.
Yeah.
Stop working out or stop doing whatever you're doing. Like, that's not how that works.
Right. You're going to quickly become unfit.
Yeah, that's how that happens. Yeah. I agree. Yeah, the time scale is the biggest thing too, because especially when setting goals, like, I think that's a massive thing that people get wrong when New Year's resolutions is probably a good example. I want to lose 20 pounds. You're like, that's great. Like, I'm so happy for you. Like, how are you going to do that though? Like, what does your day-to-day actually look like? And are you going to stick to that? Or like, what happens when you do that? When you lose that 20 pounds? Like, now what happens? Are you going to stick? Are you going to keep going? Or are you like going to just like do exactly what you've been doing in the past and gain that 20 pounds back? Like, what's your plan here? I think people don't have that plan on what that day-to-day looks like. And they either go too long in their time scale, right? And they kind of look forward 5 years in the future and like, okay, that's where I'm going to be. And they look too far and they don't focus on the day to day, or they want that instant gratification. They want that tomorrow or the next day, and they don't want to see that 5 year mark from them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's usual. I mean, if we were talking about in the past that were like, I had to order something not from Amazon in the past, and it took 5 to 7 business days, and I was like, what the hell is this? Like, why are we?
Yeah.
What am I doing? Like, it's been so long since I've hit buy, and it's not in my hand, and I was like truly frustrated by that. But Amazon is just like, it's right there.
Yeah,
it's right in your front door. Yeah, I have it.
Day.
I get it sometimes within 4 hours, depending on the product. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
well, sometimes too, like because I think Phoenix has a major distribution center.
Yeah,
for
within 10 miles
Prime.
here.
Yeah, it's like you can order it the night before, and it's like at your doorstep before 4 a.m.
Yeah,
or something like that.
It's like, it's great. Like, that's obviously a needed thing, and I love that we have that. But yeah, it does kind of, again, feed into this instant gratification culture that I would not deem super constructive. Not super constructive. It's great that it's there, but like, again, I don't think you want to feed into that. It's dangerous long term. It is dangerous, and I know that, but what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to get back to the software engineering, because I am very curious about this. The one thing that I heard growing up, and I'm sure a lot of people that hear this as well, they get the engineering paycheck. It's a huge deal, right? Like, everyone, like, in high school, I remember that being said a lot, right? You get that engineering paycheck, and like, boom, like you just made it, right? You get that 6 figures, you're good to go. I do wonder, as someone that now has had an engineering paycheck for 4+ years, or almost 4 years, how has that actually impacted your life? And is it what you thought it would be like?
It has impacted my life, but more, it's hard to really see how much it has impacted my life, I suppose, because I remember being poor in college, but that was basically coming from no money to an engineering paycheck.
Yeah.
I didn't really see what the middle ground was too much. I think I expected it to like 6 figures to feel like a lot more money, which sounds ridiculous, but like,
No.
I know families that have like 50K a year income and have families, and
somehow
like
function.
raise kids, and they function fine. And I'm like, I feel like I'm not operating at like a lifestyle that would mean that the income for those 4 people are now all going toward one person's lifestyle times 2.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
So like, I don't know.
Is that? Well, how do you see that though? Is that almost like a downer to it, or you're just like, man, I really thought, 6 figures would like, I'd feel like I'd be balling money. Like, what happened? Like, where is it? Do you feel that at all? Is it a little bit like almost? I want to say like, let's call it success dysmorphia, right? Where you like have an idea of what it should look like, and it doesn't feel like that once you're there.
Yeah. Well, so I should probably say that I never had this idea of balling out when I got a tech job. Like I truly got into it because I enjoyed coding. Yeah. Like I remember like growing up in the Bay Area, and like going into a STEM major was encouraged because that engineering paycheck or whatever. Yeah. I didn't know, like, as a high schooler, you don't know anything about money. Like I had no idea what the difference was between like $40,000 a year and $100,000 a year. Like obviously I knew what it was on paper. Yeah. But I didn't know how that would like actually play out as an adult and with like real financial obligations. Like I had no idea what it looked like. I just like knew that it was like, oh yeah, it's supposed to be like a lot of money or whatever. So yeah, before choosing a major, I was deciding like audio engineering or software engineering, and I was in a coding class my senior year of high school, and so I was like, this seems really fun. Like I'm just gonna go for it. And then even throughout college, I was doing it because I enjoyed it. So I don't know if it was a success dysmorphia because I didn't go into it with this idea of like balling out when I got into it. So it just felt like a solid job when I got into it.
Makes sense.
But I don't know. Like I remember, I guess thinking back like to high school, and people like talked about 100K a year. It was always talked about like with high praise, and it was like you'd be able to get drive like a super nice car, like. Like I drive the same car I drove in high school. Like, like I don't want a car payment. You know, like I don't have like a crazy amount of disposable income. I feel like not like it was played out or
played up to be. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I see. And so with that, because I forget what the platitude that people say where it's like once you hit the happiness threshold, I want to call it, right?
Like 60K a year or something like that.
I think it's higher. I think is it 75? I want to say
maybe it is now.
Something like
I think
with inflation, maybe it's like 90. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was 60K last year.
Yeah, but I would say like most software engineers, engineering people are over that happiness threshold. Let's call it. Do you agree with that now that you're maybe on the other side of that? Like, do you agree with this arbitrary number kind of thrown around and like, okay, all my basic needs are met, so now there is like the happiness plateaus? Do you still agree with that at this time? Do you think money is such a factor now that you're, kind of in a more, comfortable part of life, that kind of thing?
If I was living single for the foreseeable future, I would probably agree with that. Like, I don't know if, I don't know. The difference between like 100K a year or 200K a year, I guess is a big deal, but it's not as big as like being like a multimillionaire. Cause then your lifestyle changes probably, right? Like you are able to afford like vacations anywhere and like, that is attractive to me, but I feel like I'm happy, like where I'm at. I don't feel like I need money to, or need more money to like pursue happiness. I pursue it. I would like more money because I think it'd be nice, especially like 'cause, again I'm getting married and I would like to start a family in the near future, and like I'm thinking in terms of that. It's like okay, I would like to have enough money to have all of our needs met and enough disposable income to like do fun stuff and get my kids what they need and what have you. And
so that is kind of interesting too. Again, going back where it's like people with like $45,000 a year income still have a family of 4 somehow. Yeah, and that is interesting. I do wonder how that actually works because like again, like I've hit that before, and I'm like, I don't know how you could possibly raise a family. I can barely take care of myself. Like, I'm still in debt. Like, how is that even possible for a family? Like, I don't get it either. Like, I guess they just figure it out. I mean, you just figure it out, right? Your day to day. Yeah, it's like, what's kind of interesting too for people that maybe not in the workforce yet, that kind of thing, is that like you kind of go into it where it's like your money is almost like, I almost saw it like your lifeblood. Like that's like a metric on like, you're making this much. And so that's all you have per month. Like you only have like, $3,000 to spend. So it's like, that's all you have day to day. That's not actually how it works. You can be in debt $20,000 and it actually doesn't like actually change your day to day in the sense that like, oh, I thought like if you were in debt, like 50K or something, you'd just be on like, rice and bean diet, ramen forever until that's paid off. It's like, that's not actually how it works.
Everywhere.
Yeah. Like that's not actually how it works at all. Like you still have a car, right? You still are like making payments. You're still just like doing life. You're just also maybe not making as much or also in debt. But I always thought that those couldn't be together. I thought those had to be, like you had to live a very poor life until you got out of debt, until you started making more, you know what I mean? But again, that's very high school thought because like you just don't see it. And I think families kind of operate the same way. It's like, yeah, we're only making, household income of like 60K a year, that kind of thing. We have a family of 6, whatever. But it's okay because we're just going to take it day by day and we're going to make the payments that we need and get the food that we need and just kind of keep going. Yeah. And I think that's how it operates. I don't know because I don't have a family of 4, but I'm assuming that's how it is.
Well, yeah. Well, I think debt is like less of like a day-to-day burden, but I think the burden is more like long-term thinking. Yeah. Like okay, well, we want to get out of debt. If we have to pay, like if we want to pay our debt, then we need to like, set aside this much each month, which basically effectively reduces the overall income. Yeah, but you could, and you obviously want to like not accrue massive interest charges. Yeah, that's something that you have to pay like upfront or like immediately, right? But like debt could exist. For decades. And
plus if you want to get a house, obviously, right? Maybe you're renting.
It's not a good strategy, by the way. Like obviously that's not a good strategy, but like it could if needed to, or what have you.
Right. Agreed. And on the same vein of like expectation versus reality, you've been in this job again for like years and years now. Did you have an idea of what a 9-to-5 looks like in high school and a 9-to-5 where you're in right now, and how those expectation might be different than what the currently, that day to day looks like?
Well, when I was in high school, like I didn't, even in college, the idea of a 9-to-5 didn't really interest me. And Just because I've always wanted to build something like I mentioned earlier. Like I've always thought I wanted to like start a company or do something where I'm like, or maybe do something where I'm my own boss.
Yeah, of course.
Which maybe would be a 9 to 5. I've always just had like associated like 9 to 5 with like corporate position.
Yeah.
But I would say it's nicer than I expected it to be. I don't feel like, I don't know, there was this almost idea of like this, like if you get a 9 to 5 corporate position, there's like this stomping out of creativity or like being your own person or I don't know, like autonomy, like lack of autonomy or I don't know what it was, but it seemed like a very dull way to make a career to me. It didn't turn out that way. I feel like PayPal's culture is pretty solid. It feels more dynamic than I expected it to be. It doesn't actually end up working out to be like a classic 9 to 5. Like there's freedom built into, like depending on the company, of course, but there's freedom built into like PayPal schedule. Like if I needed to like leave for an hour to go like to an appointment or run an errand or something, like I can absolutely do that. I can just tell my team like, hey, I'm going to be offline for like 45 minutes or whatever. And I think that was like the lack of autonomy that I was afraid of, is like this idea like I had to be here and I couldn't leave and I was just trapped indoors all day. But especially working from home, like I have more freedom than I anticipated a 9 to 5 giving. Like I can work from my backyard or I can work from a coffee shop, which I do. Like on Fridays, we try to avoid having meetings. Like we call them focus days. And so like a lot of the times I'll just go to a coffee shop and work there. And which is like, that's the life I wanted that I thought was outside or like mutually exclusive from living a 9 to 5, was just like that dynamic nature to the day to day. And so, yeah, I feel like especially since COVID and working from home, I feel like that maybe up front it felt less so because my life didn't feel as dynamic because I was just stuck in the house all day and like there weren't coffee shops happy to host you for, working remotely. Everyone was closed down. So originally I had a hard time with it, but I think as time went on, working from home, like it became obvious that there was actually more freedom built into it. Like I work from an Airbnb, which I've done. Like we took a trip to Boise and I like worked from Idaho and so.
That is like a lot of freedom built in. I agree. And that stigma is still, I'd say, very much heavily around. It's like,
I think it exists depending on the company that you work for.
Right.
Too.
Yeah. Because I would say like, my experience is very different, right? Not a lot of freedom at all. It's like, you couldn't even like go to the bathroom if you wanted to, right? It's like, that's built into a schedule. It's like, well, you don't want that. Like that makes no sense. Like that's not giving any like freedom to humanity at all. It's like, we're not just a bunch of drones like, running around. That's not what's happening here. So yeah, it definitely depends on the company, but I'd say my expectation versus reality, I guess met expectation because I didn't want to do a 9 to 5, and and there was a point, I didn't do for a while, and then I was like, okay, let's give it a chance because I want benefits and a solid paycheck coming every 2 weeks, that kind of thing. Then I did it, best money I've ever made, 100%, by far best money I've ever made. But the freedom of it all, and because it is 9 to 5. However, my specific 9 to 5 wasn't it was much worse than a 9 to 5 than you typically would. Commute takes 30 minutes, right? You get, your lunch is there, so you're spending like not 8 hours a day there. You're spending like 10 hours a day there if you really think about all the time you're spending. And so 10 hours a day, that is most of your life. Waking hours is at this job. That's not really what I wanted. And so, yes, it was the best money, but it was not worth the lack of freedom. And so it wasn't for me. But I agree, if you can find a company that works for that and meets that expectation of, freedom and dynamicism, whatever.
Dynamism? I don't know.
Whatever. That kind of, freedom to be a human in your company, that's perfect. Like that is a solid company that you would want to work for if you had to.
Well, yeah, it definitely depends on the job itself too, like the work. Like some 9 to 5s, you go and you perform a function. Like maybe you're doing like accounting or paperwork, and like there's not a whole lot of there's not a big creative element to it. Like with engineering, specifically with what I've been working on lately, like there's just like a lot of design involved in the day to day, and like a lot of like freedom to make decisions for the system architecture, and then you implement it. And so like a lot of my time is is thinking creatively and making more decisions like autonomously as an autonomous person. It's not a top down culture where I'm handed this task and I'm supposed to execute it verbatim. Like that's not how it works. I don't know about. I mean, I'm sure some subset of tech companies operate like that, but like all tech companies are competing with each other for employees. Like there's a shortage of engineers out there, and so like there's this incentive built in to build like a good culture. And so I feel like tech at large doesn't really operate like that.
I see. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that again, that kind of goes into the impact of it all, right? If you can feel that impact, you have a much more fulfilling job, hopefully, because of that impact. But it's if you were given a task that it's like, we're only giving this because it's like far too expensive to try to automate this ourselves, and so we're going to have a human do it. That's you. Do exactly like this. Anyone else can do it, but like, you're the one hired, so here you go. That's not fulfilling, right? That's not very fun. But if you have, again, this kind of freedom of expression, and every decision that you make impacts this, and especially when it comes to software engineering, that your code is being executed or whatever decision you're making is being done millions of times, billions of times a year, huge impact all of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm feeling that on a smaller scale when it comes to anything creative, right? But like for, YouTube videos or all these shorts that we're putting out or whatever it is, it's that those decisions I make directly impacts how many people enjoy the content and that kind of thing, and in turn how much money I make, right? And so that's kind of great, because you can think of like, it's pure creativity at that point, right? Like it's a blank canvas, there's nothing, it's just like whatever you want to make, you can make, and then hopefully it's something people like, and then in that turn you make more of it. But the more bigger impact, everyone will like it, and everyone will enjoy it, or someone will get something from it, or think about whatever you're saying, that kind of thing. That's huge. That's impact.
For sure. Yeah. It's interesting that the difference between like the creative work that I do versus you do. Like I mean, people don't like. I think people outside of tech don't think of engineering as a creative endeavor.
Yeah.
But I mean, you and I have pursued many different like creative hobbies together. Like I'd hope you'd classify me as a creative person. Like it definitely satisfies that desire to create. But yeah, like comparing it to like what I do and you do. Like I'm creating. Much more within, like the constraints are much more apparent to me. Like I am able to have the freedom to be creative, but I have to operate within these constraints, and it does have to, like, the solution that I build has to go towards something very specific. Yeah. Whereas you have this kind of like the world is your oyster kind of dynamic, where you can create, like you can just have an idea pop in your head, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make that, and then and then you actually create it and build it, and then put it out to production under your company.
Right. And I'd say it is fundamentally, I'd say the skeleton is the same. What I mean by that is that, like, yes, we're solving different problems. Mine is, I have an idea in my head, and it's again, it can be anything. Yes, I'm in the constraints of like a video, so I'm in the constraints of, digital audio, digital video, right? And whatever that means. And so that is constraints, but not really. Like, you can it's pretty much infinite. Yours is more of like a puzzle, right? It's more of just here's what we're trying to do. How do we do that? And you're like, okay, well, it's creative in the fact that there is no set way to do it, that you just can kind of do it however it works to find that solution. But again, skeletally, we're trying to immortalize an idea, right? And that is a huge deal. And I think that's where money, like actual money, comes in and value comes to play. Is like, people write books, right? And we deem that as, like, if it's a good book, a really fantastic thing, because you're immortalizing work, and then that will be bought over the years and time to come. And so you're just always getting money from that. Same thing with code, right? You're making some immortalized code, and that will be executed millions upon millions of time. That's value, and you're going to get paid accordingly. Same thing with YouTube videos. You're going to make those videos. Those don't go away unless you want them to. But if they don't, everyone will hopefully watch it, as the time goes on, and you're only going to accumulate more money. It's all the same. All of those things are the same thing. You're immortalizing an idea, but you're providing value towards it because it hopefully provides value to someone else.
Yeah. Well, the most profitable endeavors are those that scale well. Yeah. Right, like that's a technical reason why software engineers are paid so much.
Yeah,
like I can write a piece of code and then throw it out to production, and it provides value for the company. Like the acquisition, for example, let's go back to like when I started working on acquisition. Right, like I wrote a bunch of code that was responsible for acquiring credit products, or for people to acquire credit products. So obviously, PayPal makes money when people use their credit products. So I built this thing that helps people get credit products, and I put it out there, and it's done. I haven't worked on acquisition in years, but that code is still being executed. Like it's making the company money while I sleep. So that's the technical reason why engineers are paid so much, because like there's not many fields out there where your work can scale to millions of people, even when you're not working directly, right? Like a lot of I guess a counter example to that would be like a teacher, right? Like a daycare teacher.
Yeah.
Like you can only, one person can only watch so many kids. At the end of the day, like you have a cap on how much value you can provide.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, like so YouTube, right? Like you're not going to make any money if you make a video and only one person sees it.
Right.
But you can make a ton of money if you make a video and it's out there and then millions and millions of people see it.
Right. Yeah. True value. That's it. Yeah. As more eyes on it, more, people touching it, that kind of thing, more value inherently. Right. And and we're running out of time here, but I do want to end on this kind of note. So for people that maybe want to get into software engineering, that kind of thing, now that you kind of ran the gauntlet as in like interested in high school, pursued it in college, have a PayPal engineer, like software engineering job, I'd say that is like running it, and then have done what are those things you do, like hackathons?
Yeah, hackathons.
And doing all that, like you did like the gauntlet of coding, I'd say. Like that is like you did the path.
Like the textbook path
Yeah.
for it. Yeah.
And so with that, like would you have any advice for like, let's say like younger coders or no one that has coded before, but maybe have some kind of inkling of interest? What is the best way to kind of get into that? And how do they kind of ensure, maybe not success, but definitely like fulfillment within coding?
Yeah. So first thing I'll say is like, I went into the industry with a degree, but you do not need a degree to be successful in the industry. Like I've interviewed many people for PayPal, and we've hired people that don't actually have like a college degree. That just like, I mean, there's like things out there called boot camps. So it's like like a fast path to like having the skills of a developer or a software engineer. But as long as you're able to prove your merit in some way, you can get a job as a software engineer. So you don't need to go the college path. But to be successful, like for someone who like just wants to get into it, I would say probably just start with YouTube. Like literally, if you just like put on YouTube, like how to code, and I would start with YouTube. Like you can Google it too, but I feel like YouTube just like, I mean, for someone who doesn't know what they're doing, to be able to just like have someone explain it to you, because you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. And see somebody explain it to you in a video form, like it's just probably the fastest way, because like there's just a plethora of content on YouTube and it's all free. And then from there, I would say just like start building things, like really simple things. Like there's this thing called, like there's like a concept of like a Hello World program, which is like if you're trying to learn a language, like the first thing you're gonna do is like try to get like the phrase like Hello World like to print out to the screen. And so just doing that, and then like being able to see, just like allow that to give you the dopamine that it deserves. Like for you to like write code and then compile it. Your computer understands it, and then it does what you expect it to. Like just, I mean, it's very simple, but you did automate something. Like you created something, and that did something with your hands off. Like that's really cool. And I would just say build incrementally bigger projects or more complex things. So that's how you would like get your feet wet on it. To be successful, though, I do think introducing a social element to it is really important. So you mentioned that I did hackathons. I don't think I would be a very successful engineer if I didn't have a good community around me, if I didn't do those hackathons. Like college can only teach you so much. It could teach you the textbook things, but it does not teach you how to integrate those things into the real world. What hackathons are, for those that don't know, is it's basically like it's usually in the form of like a weekend-long project where like you go either with a team that you form beforehand, or you go solo, and then like the orchestrators will try and like group you with some other people that don't have a team. But the point is you have a team for a weekend, and you just try and build some problem or some project that addresses some problem statement. They're all different. Like some of them are like, hey, just like literally just build something cool. The other one is like, hey, integrate like Amazon's API into whatever project you're doing. For PayPal hosted a couple hackathons where it's like we have all these charities that go through that participate, and they all have like some issue that they need addressed, and so we need you to build out a project that addresses their problem.
Gotcha.
But that just teaches you how to integrate code into a real world situation, and then doing it socially is so important, because everyone kind of goes on their own path, and then only in a social setting can you really circulate like what you know with each other, you know, like so for example, like my first hackathon, I did it with a couple of my friends, and we were building a website, and I had not built a website before, and so I didn't know what I was doing. But my team member, who was a really good friend of mine, I used to live with him, like knew a lot about web development, and so I learned web development at that hackathon. I didn't learn it in school, you know. So yeah, like the social element, keeping each other accountable, and then learning how to integrate your knowledge into the real world, I think is really important.
I love that. Okay, so what I'm hearing is first, exhaust free resources while you
Yeah.
can, because there's no reason to spend thousands for it if you don't want to. Second, it's use practical work. Practice makes perfect in a sense, right? And start using that in practicality setting, but also do it in a sense where it makes you feel good. Don't just like practice to suffer. Like that's
Right.
not the purpose. And then third, embed yourself in the culture, right?
Yeah.
That's where the biggest thing. You're going to learn way more from friends and working on practical solutions than working in, through a textbook, let's say, usually.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I like that. That's perfect. I think we should end there. Thanks so much for coming on finally.
Of course.
This is good.
Thanks for
And
having
then I'm sure we'll have you on again.
Yeah.
All
In
right.
the future. Well, thanks for having me.
Of course. Until next time, everyone.
Bye.